On the morning of October 13th, 1982, the screaming in Harlan County stopped at exactly 3:47 a.m., but the dogs in the area kept howling until the sun came up. This wasn't the first time a heavy silence had fallen over the Cumberland Mountains. For decades, the region had been filled with coal dust and dark secrets. The events in these Kentucky hills would later reveal how isolation can turn a family into something unrecognizable, and how a whole community can ignore the truth. Copperhead Hollow, a small remote area, was home to the Marty family, who had lived there, grown their family, and buried their secrets for over a century. It had a population of only 43 people, though counting was tricky. The hollow was nestled between two ridges, and the only way in was a gravel road that the county stopped maintaining in the 1960s. Mail arrived only twice a week, depending on the postal worker's memory. Electricity finally arrived in 1974, though many families still relied on kerosene lamps out of habit. At the end of the hollow stood the McCready compound, a collection of trailers and lean-tos that seemed to grow out of the earth like mushrooms. By 1980, 3 generations of the McCready family lived close together: patriarch Ezekiel, his 6 children, and their growing number of grandchildren, many of whose parentage became confusing over time. The family tree seemed more like a tangled mess, difficult to follow or untangle. County records showed 14 births at the compound between 1975 and 1982, but only 9 death certificates were ever filed. The first sign that something was wrong came in September 1981, when a social worker named Margaret Finley tried to enroll the McCready children in school. Her report described several children with developmental delays, signs of isolation, and possible malnutrition. She also noted that many of the children looked alike, despite being listed as cousins. The most unsettling part of her report was that the youngest children seemed fearful of adults outside their family. However, the social worker's report was ignored, and the matter was dismissed. Mountain families, it was argued, had their own ways, and the McCready family wasn't bothering anyone. Plus, Ezekiel had friends in the sheriff's department, men who remembered when his moonshine had helped feed their families during tough times. Some silences in the mountains, they believed, were better left undisturbed. As time passed, strange things started happening. Hunters noticed that animals avoided the McCready property, as if something was scaring them away. The creek near the compound started running murky all year round, with sediment that didn't match the local geology. Neighbors heard sounds at night that didn't belong to any animal they knew. Something dark was growing in the shadows. By the summer of 1982, the youngest McCready children never left the trees that marked the edge of their property. The older ones only left to trade goods in town, avoiding eye contact and moving with an eerie silence, as though they'd learned that making noise brought unwanted attention. Then, one October night, Deputy Sheriff Michael Torres decided to investigate reports of gunshots coming from the hollow. What he discovered that night would haunt the police files for years. Before even stepping out of his patrol car, he could smell the decay. It wasn't just poverty. Something else was hiding behind that face. Torres approached the main trailer and saw movement through the windows, shadows that darted away unnaturally fast. As he got closer, 3 children emerged from behind a rusty truck. They were impossible to age. They could have been anywhere between 8 and 18 years old. Their clothes were torn, but their eyes seemed intelligent in a way that was almost wild. The oldest girl, with matted hair, spoke in a heavy dialect, telling him he wasn't supposed to be there after dark because Granddaddy don't like strangers. Torres explained he was there about gunfire, and the children silently communicated without words. The girl nodded toward the largest trailer, where dim light leaked through the torn curtains. Inside, Torres heard the clink of utensils and low conversation, like a family dinner. But something felt off. The shadows seemed wrong, and the people inside, their movements frozen in place, looked like mannequins. Only their eyes tracked his every move with a predator's focus. Torres tried to make small talk, asking if everyone was safe, but Ezekiel's smile revealed teeth filed to points, an unsettling sight. The smell of cooked meat filled the air, but the proportions of the scene seemed wrong. The room was too still. The family at the table, 7 adults and over a dozen children, sat silently, their eyes fixed on him. Then something caught Torres's attention. A child's bicycle, partially buried behind the trailer, still slowly spinning in the breeze. It belonged to Amy Chen, a 7-year-old girl who had gone missing from a camping trip 6 months earlier. Torres recognized it immediately. This single piece of evidence tied the Macready family to a series of disappearances, spanning nearly 20 years. The discovery of the bike turned what might have been seen as just eccentric mountain living into something far darker, connecting the Macready family to numerous unresolved disappearances. Torres photographed the bike, his hands shaking, realizing that the law might never be able to reach into the darkest corners of the world. The soft breeze moved the streamers, almost like fingers inviting him to uncover the hollow's secrets. Later, state police would discover a disturbing pattern that local authorities had missed. Since 1964, 23 children between the ages of 5 and 12 had vanished from areas across Harlan, Pike, and Floyd counties, always from families who were camping, hiking, or traveling in the remote Appalachian mountains. These disappearances left 23 families in agony, not knowing what happened to their children. The official explanation was always the same. The children wandered off, got lost in the dense woods, or fell into hidden mine shafts or rushing creeks. The mountains, rangers explained, were dangerous, and accidents happened. Bodies were rarely found, and families were encouraged to accept the loss without closure. But now, Torres realized that some of those children hadn't just gotten lost. They'd been found. While he sat in his patrol car, trying to contact backup, he noticed movement in the shadows around him. The Macready children had emerged and were circling his car, moving with an eerie, synchronized precision like a pack. The oldest girl appeared at his passenger window, her face pressed against the glass. In the dim green light, Torres saw that her canine teeth had been filed to points. Just like her grandfather's, she mouthed words he couldn't hear, but the message was clear. He wasn't leaving the hollow that night. His radio crackled with static. No matter how much he adjusted it, he couldn't reach dispatch. The children began rocking his patrol car, gently at first, then more violently. Torres pulled his service weapon, but he couldn't bring himself to aim it at the children, even though their eyes reflected light, like predators, and their nails had been sharpened into claws. He remembered his training and the stories of the Sunny Bean clan, a family of cannibals from the 16th century Scotland who preyed on travelers. Torres had once thought of it as a historical curiosity, a lesson about how isolation could corrupt. But now, sitting in his patrol car surrounded by the Macready children, he realized that some horrors weren't confined to the past. A report filed by Detective Frank Morrison on November 2, 1982, would later confirm that the Macready compound was the site of a long history of predation. Morrison's team found personal items belonging to at least 15 missing children, hidden throughout the property, along with crude drawings showing hunting techniques specifically designed to capture young humans. But that night, Torres didn't know any of that. He only knew that he had stumbled onto something that would challenge everything he had ever believed about evil. As the children stopped rocking his car, they began to sing a lullaby in their thick dialect. Their voices harmonized in a way that felt unnatural. Too perfect. The haunting melody made Torres feel drowsy, despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He realized that this was how the Macready family had lured the camping children away from their families, promising safety warmth, and something that looked like love from afar. What kind of family teaches its children to hunt other children? And what kind of society allows such a family to exist, refining their techniques across generations? The singing grew louder, but then Torres saw lights moving through the trees, not the bright beams of his backup, but the flickering glow of torches held by the adult members of the Macready family, approaching with calm determination. The torches moved like falling stars, casting long, dancing shadows across the forest. Torres counted at least 12 figures moving in from different directions, each one moving with the precise coordination of experienced hunters. This wasn't a random act of violence or desperation. This was a family business, passed down like a skill or tradition. Torres's radio had gone completely dead. No static. His backup wasn't coming, and even if they were, it would take them too long to get to him. Then Ezekiel Macready appeared, carrying what looked like a modified hunting rifle. Its barrel had been shortened, and strange symbols were carved into the stock. Behind him walked a woman Torres didn't recognize, tall and gaunt, with iron-gray hair braided with what looked like small bones. She moved with the confidence of someone who expected to be obeyed without question. "That's Granny Macready," the girl at Torres's window whispered, her breath fogging the glass. "She's the one who teaches us the old ways, the hungry ways." Torres tried to start his engine, but it sputtered once and then died, making a sound that almost seemed like laughter. The children began to retreat from his car, their job apparently done. Whatever they had done to disable his vehicle, it had been done quietly and efficiently, while he had been distracted by their singing. The Kentucky State Police would later find evidence of the Macready family's twisted methods: hidden pits, snare traps, and underground tunnels connecting their various trailers. The entire property had been turned into a hunting preserve, designed for one specific kind of prey. But at that moment, Torres had no idea about the tunnels or the family's horrifying system. All he knew was that he was trapped in a place where the normal rules of civilization had been suspended so long that they had become a tradition. The torchbearers formed a loose circle around his car, staying just out of reach of his headlights. They weren't advancing yet, but they weren't retreating either. They were waiting for something, or maybe just for the right moment. Torres, familiar with hunting accidents, recognized the signs. They were giving him time to panic and exhaust himself before they moved in for the kill. Granny Macready raised a skeletal hand, and the circle of figures stopped moving. Her voice carried across the hollow with an authority that made her words feel like ancient commands. "Been a long time since we had us a lawman," she said. "Last one was back in '68. A state trooper who got too curious about the missing hikers." Torres's blood ran cold. He remembered the case, Trooper Daniel Kellerman, who had disappeared while investigating reports of missing campers in the Daniel Boone National Forest. Kellerman's patrol car had been found abandoned, the doors open and the radio still crackling with unanswered calls. Granny's voice carried a note of respect as she spoke of Kellerman's fight. "Took 3 of the boys to bring him down, but he was tough, eating all muscle and gristle. You look like you might be more tender." The children had disappeared into the darkness, and Torres knew they were taking positions around his vehicle, cutting off any chance of escape. This family had been perfecting their hunting skills for years, and Torres was about to become their latest victim. What do you do when you realize that the laws you enforce mean nothing to people who have created their own twisted justice? The torchbearers closed in, and Torres made his decision in the split second between heartbeats. He wasn't going to die sitting in a disabled patrol car. Kicking open his door, he rolled into the darkness, using every shadow to stay hidden from the advancing hunters. This desperate move would save his life, but it would also reveal the full extent of the horrors the Macready family had been perfecting in their isolated hollow. As Torres moved through the dark, the ground beneath him felt off, soft in some places, too firm in others, as though the earth had been altered. It didn't take long for him to discover why. His foot broke through what seemed to be solid ground, revealing a hidden entrance to a tunnel system that snaked under the entire hollow. The tunnels had been hand-dug but reinforced with wood and metal, forming a network that connected every building on the Macabre property. What was even more disturbing was what he saw in the dim light of his failing flashlight. Small rooms, almost like cells, had heavy wooden doors and crude ventilation systems. It was clear that the family had created a system designed to hold and preserve their victims. Months later, a forensic report would reveal that at least 37 bodies were found in various stages of preservation. Within the tunnels, the details were chilling. Evidence showed systematic processing of human remains, with particular care given to preservation to keep them from decaying in the damp conditions. Torres could hear the Macready family above, their whistles and calls cutting through the night air like animals coordinating a hunt. The occasional flicker of torchlight filtered down through hidden openings, creating patterns of light and shadow that made navigating the tunnels feel like a maze of wrong turns and dead ends. In one of the side chambers, Torres stumbled upon something that nearly shattered his sanity. Children's clothes neatly folded, tiny shoes arranged in rows, stuffed animals placed as if they were still being played with. On the walls, dozens of names and dates had been scratched in, creating an inventory of victims stretching back to 1959. Some of the names Torres recognized from his training, missing children whose cases had never been solved. Others were so old that the families who had lost them were likely gone. The Macready family had been hunting for decades, perfecting their methods with each success. Near the bottom of one wall, in a child's shaky handwriting, was a message that stopped Torres in his tracks. "My name is Tommy Walsh. Today is my birthday. I am 8 years old. If someone finds this, tell my mom and dad I love them, and I'm sorry I went with the singing lady." The message was dated August 12, 1979. Torres immediately remembered the case. Tommy Walsh, who had vanished during a family camping trip in Daniel Boone National Forest. His parents had spent everything they had looking for him, never knowing that their son had survived long enough to carve his final message in this underground nightmare. Up above, the search was growing closer. Torres could hear the Macready family discussing how best to flush him out. Someone suggested filling the tunnels with smoke. Another mentioned using dogs. But then Torres realized they weren't talking about animals. "Turn loose the young ones," Granny Macready's voice echoed through the tunnels. "They know these holes better than anybody, and they can smell fear from a mile away." Torres's stomach turned as the sounds above shifted. It wasn't the growl of dogs. It was the sharp, excited yelping of the Macready children, eager for the hunt. He understood now, with horrifying clarity, that the children had been raised for exactly this purpose. They weren't just children, they were predators, trained to hunt and capture. The Macready children moved through the tunnels like creatures perfectly suited to their environment, silent, quick, and efficient. Their eyes had adapted to the dim light, their hearing was sharp, and their understanding of morality had been twisted into something monstrous. Torres pressed himself into a narrow alcove, trying to keep his breathing steady as small figures passed by in the darkness. They whispered in clicks and low murmurs, coordinating their search like a military unit. But it wasn't just strategy, it was excitement, the thrill of the hunt, and the joy that normal children might show while playing a game. The oldest girl, the one who had spoken to Torres at the patrol car, was leading them. Her voice carried a cold, calculated authority that no child should ever have. "Deputy man's scared," she said. "Can smell it on him. Thick as molasses. He's trying to be quiet, so he's probably military trained. Gotta be smart about this." Another voice, younger but equally confident, piped in. "Found his blood trail where he scraped his hand on the rocks. He's moving toward the old processing rooms. Torres realized with a jolt that he was bleeding from a cut he hadn't noticed while crawling through the tunnels. The children's heightened senses had already picked up on it, leaving a trail that led straight to him. In the distance, Torres heard them discussing which tunnels to block off, where to funnel him toward the meat rooms, and whether to take him alive or kill him quickly. Their tone was casual, as if they were deciding what game to play next. "Found where he's hiding," the oldest girl said, now much closer. "Can hear his heartbeat from here. Sounds like a scared rabbit." Torres knew they had pinpointed his location. In a panic, he began moving deeper into the maze of tunnels, hoping to find another exit or at least a safer spot. But every turn led to another dead end or another chamber filled with evidence of the family's horrific practices. In one room, he found a gruesome preservation facility: hooks, salt barrels, and cutting tools arranged with the meticulousness of a butcher's shop. The walls were lined with crude drawings showing various dismemberment techniques, annotated in careful handwriting. What kind of family passes down knowledge of human butchery like it's a trade? Torres was horrified to realize that he wasn't just dealing with a family of killers. They had created a whole system, an entire way of life, centered around hunting and butchering people. Suddenly, the children's voices stopped. They were whispering now, and Torres could sense the change in the air, concern, not excitement. Then he heard the oldest girl's voice, sharp with alarm. "Somebody's coming. Big people got to get back upstairs." Torres could hear the faint sound of vehicles and shouting from above. Backup had finally arrived. A moment later, the Kentucky State Police and FBI vehicles arrived, their lights flashing in the night. The sight revealed the full extent of the Macabre compound, an isolated network of tunnels, trailers, and outbuildings that had been perfectly hidden until now. But the agents weren't just here because of one missing deputy. This raid was the result of a 2-year investigation linking the Macabre family's activities to a pattern of disappearances across 3 states, tied to families who had lived off the grid for generations, surviving off resources that couldn't be explained. Special Agent Patricia Valdez had been tracking this network since 1980, when an audit of missing person cases revealed unusual patterns, anomalies that couldn't be explained by coincidence or accidents. The Macabre family was just one branch of a much larger network, hidden deep in the Appalachian mountains. For years, too many children had disappeared from remote areas, where certain families had long held claims to large stretches of land. These disappearances followed eerie similarities: families camping or hiking, children wandering off, and extensive searches yielding no clues. The operation launched that night was codenamed Harvest Moon, a name that would prove unsettlingly appropriate for what investigators were about to uncover. As Torres emerged from the dark tunnel system, covered in dirt and blood, rambling about underground chambers filled with children's clothing, the horror became clearer. Agent Fald's team moved through the compound with military precision, their tactical lights illuminating the true scale of what had been hidden by torchlight. In the main trailer, investigators found a kitchen equipped for processing large amounts of meat, with industrial-grade grinders and preservation tools, far more than any normal family would ever need. Freezers hummed, powered by illegally diverted electricity, adding to the grim machinery of survival based on predation. But it was the children who presented the greatest challenge to law enforcement. Ranging in age from 5 to 17, they had been so thoroughly conditioned by their environment that they couldn't comprehend the situation. When agents attempted to separate them from the adults, several children became violently aggressive, attacking officers with the coordinated fury of wild animals defending their pack. Dr. Maria Santos's psychological report, filed in December 1982, described the children as functionally feral, displaying trauma-bonding behaviors, but towards their family, not protectors. These children had never attended school, never interacted with outsiders, and had no concept that there was another way to live. When Granny McCready was finally cornered in the main trailer, she showed no remorse or understanding that she had done anything wrong. In her statement, recorded on October 14, 1982, she rationalized the family's actions. "Ain't no different than hunting deer or rabbits. World's got too many people anyway. We just doing what nature intended, strong eating the weak." The evidence recovered from the compound filled 3 entire FBI warehouse facilities, personal belongings from victims dating back to the 1950s, meticulous records of each kill, and photographs documenting the family's evolution from opportunistic hunting to organized predation were all found. Perhaps most chilling were the crude training manuals, documents detailing how to lure children away from their families, methods for disabling adult victims, and techniques for preserving human meat. The McCready family had turned cannibalism into a science, complete with research notes and experimental data. What do you do with children who were raised to view other children as livestock? How do you rehabilitate minds that never learned the basic moral boundaries that most people take for granted? These were questions that would challenge the criminal justice system for years to come. But in the immediate aftermath, the priority shifted to discovering how many other families were operating similar hunting grounds in the isolated corners of America. As dawn broke over Copperhead Hollow, Agent Valdez received a chilling radio call. Similar compounds had been identified in West Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. These were linked by family ties and shared hunting methods, suggesting a coordinated network that spanned multiple generations. Even before the sun fully rose, law enforcement agencies from across 4 states reported that families had suddenly abandoned their remote properties, leaving behind empty buildings and the lingering smell of smoke from hastily destroyed evidence. This coordinated exodus revealed the true scope of the investigation, not just a single family of cannibals, but a network of related clans that had been sharing techniques and victims for over a century. The McCready family was just the tip of the iceberg. Investigators discovered that the network operated on a rotation system. When the pressure became too great in one area, families would relocate to territories controlled by other branches of the network. Children raised within this system saw the entire Appalachian region as a single hunting ground, with different families controlling different sections, much like medieval lords dividing a kingdom. Communication between these families had evolved into something far more sophisticated than simple word of mouth. Investigators uncovered evidence of coded messages passed through classified ads in local newspapers, at rural post offices, and even via illegal CB radio networks. When the McCready compound was raided, word had spread through these channels in a matter of hours. By 1983, law enforcement had uncovered at least 7 related family groups operating in Kentucky, West Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina, controlling territories that included popular camping spots and hiking trails, prime locations for luring isolated victims. The Buchanan clan in West Virginia targeted hitchhikers along remote stretches of Interstate 77. The Crowley family in North Carolina focused on backpackers using the Appalachian Trail. Despite the variations in hunting grounds, all the families shared a core methodology: identify isolated victims, lure them to remote areas, and dispose of the bodies where searches would be difficult. These families knew how to select victims who wouldn't be missed immediately: drifters, runaways, or tourists who never told anyone their plans. The children rescued from these compounds posed unique challenges for social services. Many had never been taught to read or write, had no understanding of conventional morality, and displayed behaviors that were difficult to categorize. Dr. Amanda Foster, who worked with the rescued children, described them as being conditioned to see predation as normal family activity. They were confused about why their lifestyle was considered immoral, and their mindset resembled that of children raised in isolated cults. However, unlike religious cults, the cannibal families did not claim divine justification for their actions. They saw their practices as a pragmatic response to isolation and scarcity, a way of surviving in an environment where conventional resources were scarce. During his interrogation on October 20th, 1982, Ezekiel McCready revealed how deeply ingrained these practices were in his family's culture. "Been doing this since my granddaddy's time. He learned it from his granddaddy, who learned it from the old country. Ain't nothing new about it, just folks taking care of their own when times get hard." This old country reference led investigators to historical records, revealing similar practices in isolated regions of Scotland and Ireland during the 18th and 19th centuries, exactly the areas from which many Appalachian families had originally emigrated. This wasn't a new phenomenon triggered by poverty or desperation. It was a cultural tradition, passed down through generations. What happens when an entire way of life is built around predation? How do you dismantle a network that has thrived for over a century? The answer came in the form of Operation Mountain Sweep, an unprecedented coordinated law enforcement action that targeted all known network locations at once, ensuring that no family could escape to continue their operations elsewhere. Even today, hikers in remote areas of Appalachia sometimes report finding abandoned compounds deep in the mountains, empty buildings with strange modifications, underground chambers with no apparent purpose, and an atmosphere of lingering dread. Investigators know they're only scratching the surface, and the next case could be even darker. Operation Mountain Sweep launched at exactly 4 a.m. on November 15th, 1982, with simultaneous raids across 17 locations in 4 states, marking the largest coordinated law enforcement operation in Appalachian history. The results far exceeded even the most pessimistic projections of federal investigators. This final phase of the investigation revealed that the network of cannibal families had been operating for over a century, with some family lines tracing their predatory practices back to the 1800s. What had started as a desperate survival tactic during the harshest years of mountain settlement had morphed into a sustainable lifestyle, claiming hundreds of victims over generations. The evidence collected during the raids filled an entire FBI warehouse. It included personal belongings of victims dating back to the 1920s, photographs documenting the family's hunts like other families might document holidays, and genealogical records revealing the true scope of the network. Over 200 individuals across 12 extended family groups, all connected by blood, marriage, and shared hunting techniques, were uncovered. What was most disturbing were the children. 47 minors were rescued, ranging from infants to teenagers. Many had never seen electric lights or indoor plumbing. Some spoke only a hybrid dialect that combined archaic English with unrecognizable terms. All of them had been raised to see human predation as normal, just like hunting deer or raising livestock. Dr. Patricia Henley, the clinical psychologist who assessed the children, described them as a unique case of environmental conditioning. They had been systematically isolated from moral frameworks and taught to view what society considers heinous behaviors as part of regular family life. This inherited hunger had become deeply ingrained. The adult family members showed varying levels of cooperation with investigators. Some, like Ezekiel McCready, seemed genuinely confused by the legal proceedings against them. Others were more intelligent, providing minimal information while trying to protect any network members who might have escaped the raids. Granny McCready, the matriarch of the network, was the most chilling subject during her interview. Her statement to the FBI was blunt and chilling. "Y'all act like we invented something new. Folks been eating folks since the beginning of time. We're just honest about it. At least we don't pretend we're civilized while we're doing it." The trials that followed spanned 3 years, resulting in 47 convictions for murder, kidnapping, and violations of federal laws. But these legal proceedings didn't address the deeper questions about the nature of civilization itself, and how easily human societies could revert to predatory behaviors when cut off from moral oversight. The investigation also uncovered that the families kept detailed records of their practices, treating their predation as a form of oral history. Children were taught songs to celebrate successful hunts, stories passed down tactical knowledge, and rituals that reinforced their separation from the outside world. The last active member of the network, Sarah Buchanan, was arrested in 1985 while trying to set up a new hunting ground near the New River Gorge. Her capture marked the official end of Operation Mountain Sweep, but law enforcement knew that other isolated families might still be continuing the same practices in undiscovered locations. Deputy Michael Torres, whose discovery of the Macabre compound had triggered the investigation, retired in 1984. He moved to a small town in Florida, trying to distance himself from the mountains. Neighbors reported that he kept his curtains drawn and never answered his door after dark, unable to escape the lingering shadows of what he had uncovered. The Macabre compound was burned to the ground by federal agents in December 1982, but local residents still claim that smoke rises from the hollow on certain nights, not from any fire, but from appetites that were never fully satisfied. Even today, park rangers in the remote parts of Appalachia sometimes find abandoned campsites where families have disappeared without a trace, leaving only empty tents and an eerie sense that something patient and hungry is still watching from the tree line. This investigation revealed only the surface of a far darker truth. The case was far from over, and the next chapter could be even more horrifying.